Greetings YouTube and welcome to the Blue Corner into a Cardfight deck profile. And as you can tell by the back here, we're going to be talking about Nightrose for standard format. As I wanted to give my thoughts on the deck that I played during my Cardfight area games. This is a slightly modified version of that build, and I'll talk about what's changed since then. And yeah, I'm excited to be playing in this deck at some point because Nightrose was one of my favorite decks in G, and they managed to do a pretty good job of emulating her playstyle into standard format. Now I know what you're thinking though, this doesn't look like the Nightrose that you were using, and that's because this is the G Nightrose. I'm using my old Nightrose cards as proxies for the new stuff, as I didn't want to waste all the ink on making so many of the cards in this deck proxied out when I don't have anything to use them for. It's not like I have any locals to play at even for probably the next couple of months. Like Bermuda 19 is still doing its thing and Canada's been taking it pretty seriously. So that being said, I'm just going to go over what I'm using in here, and I'm going to be putting up descriptions of the card effects in the video for anyone to read as I have them on the mat. So yeah, with that being said, let's get into it. So Nightrose's playstyle is, for better or worse, a G deck, as it has the nuances and complexities that come with a G deck, although obviously nowhere near as much as a G deck. It's still a standard deck after all, and that's great for people who play G Nightrose or just G decks in general, because they'll find themselves at home with a deck like this, which requires you to be more on top of what you're doing, as you have to manage your drop zone resources and how to get the most mileage out of them very carefully. But at the same time, that might actually scare some people off, because again, this is a more complex deck than say something like the Cross. So as a result, I think this will be a good deck. It'll see play just because a lot of people will simp for Nightrose, myself included. She's one of the more well-known boss cards of G, but I think it's probably not going to perform as well as I would like it to, just simply because there won't be enough good people piling in the deck, maybe. I mean, if it ends up being high tier 1, that'd be great, but my expectations are low tier 1, high tier 2, simply because it's Harry or Shaharwat, but with more steps to it, and a lot of people just simply don't have the patience for that anymore. So with that being said, as far as what I'm playing, for a starter, it's literally any V starter that you got. I'm using Grenache because I have always found his artwork to be better than the other Grand Blue starters. Then for the grade 3s, 4 copies of Nightrose. So her effects are, during your turn, when your rearguard attacks or boosts, it gets plus 5,000. Afterwards, they retire itself. This is not optional, it is mandatory. And then afterwards, also when she attacks, you can counter +1, choose a column, call 2 rearguards to that column, front and back. And if she is against a grade 3, or rather if your opponent's on a grade 3 Vanguard, she gets potentially 10,000 power. I gotta be very careful in how I say that, because she can actually attack a rearguard and still do the thing, which comes up in some fringe situations. Like if you're up against 7Cs, you're gonna kill off their rearguards first, because a lot of 7Cs players tend to like protect their rearguards as if their life depended on it, especially Slash Shade. So I've sometimes just gone rearguard on rearguard, rearguard on rearguard, and Nightrose on rearguard, and they'll either let it die or they'll throw a perfect guard down, and then just keep going, and eventually they're like down to 1 card or something. I don't know, maybe that's how maybe that's just how 7Cs players play on area and not IRL, but in any case, so TLDR, this is basically Mist Phantasm Pirate King Nightrose, but better, and the 5,000 buff but auto retire can be annoying, but I've always found that to be not much of an issue, because you're drawing cards and still swinging with big numbers. Like, this is how the deck is able to play like its hollow version, where like you call big beefy attackers, swing, and then they die at the end of the turn. It's just that you aren't waiting until the end of the turn for your hollow units to die, they just die immediately. And this is great for dodging removal, which is pretty prominent in the format that this deck is coming out into, as you've got Kagero, Gear Chronicle, and Link Joker, and to a lesser extent Narukami, all able to remove units. Link Joker and Narukami can just bind them, and Nightrose obviously doesn't want its cards to be bound, so being able to just yeet them out of there is great. This also is good in some upcoming stuff, as you've got Mega Colony with Gridora and her Cradle markers. Nightrose can just call her units and then just make them go away, and Gridora has nothing to Cradle marker. And kind of curious actually how the matchup is going to play out, but in any case, if Nightrose is a fantastic card, and if you aren't on her, it's a bit of an oof. And this is pretty much the main card you're on. There's no Cocytus in here. He doesn't work in this deck. It's a lot like how Gauntlet Buster and Draconic Vanquisher clash. Like, they require different deck builds to get the best value. So I'm not playing Cocytus, and truth be told, I think the card's a little pricey for what he's worth now. Then for the remaining grade 3, speaking of pricey stuff, you've got Skull Dragon. So fortunately, you do need this guy, and you'll need 2 of them as your kill play involves having 2 of these in circulation. You don't need 3. I've seen some people play 3 because they fear damage checking it, and I can understand that, but I don't think you need 3. You can use Columbard to put in a drop zone. You can use Navigator to mill it potentially. Greed Shade can also ditch it. So it's not hard to get them into circulation, but yeah, this guy is your win con. He allows you to push your opponent for either a damage or a perfect guard or several cards out of their hand, as by the time you're calling Skull Dragons out, he'll be swinging for about 40,000 or more. And especially during late game, then he'll be swinging in the 60s. Then for the grade 2s, of course, you got one of your best cards in the deck, honestly, which is Columbard. So V Columbard's effect is when it's placed, you can counterblast 1, search your deck for any card, put it in the drop zone, then choose any card in your drop zone, doesn't have to be the card that you send, and call it to Rearguard Circle. However, Columbard happens to have a hard once per turn, which that means that even if you use them the one time, if you use them again, or rather if you call them again, you can't call anything back. Seen some people on CFA try and use them twice, and they just didn't read the card properly because LOL, what's reading cards? But yeah, fantastic card. He allows you to thin your deck out of potential Garnets. You can call back Ripple Banshee in early game to Soul Blast out your Negro Bones. You can use him in battle phase to call Skull Dragons out, which is part of your kill play. Great card. And then, because I like him so much, I'm playing 2 more copies in the form of Captain Nightmist. Now, these were originally Negro Lazies, who I honestly think gets a bit of a bad rap. It's not an amazing card, but I think Negro Lazy isn't also awful either. Like, I think, for a lack of a better term, he is a Sylvia, but you just need a card and drop, and that card is something you're probably going to guard with going first anyway. So, I like him. Like, he's a free body that gets you another... Yeah, he just gets you a free body. He'll be a 24 column or 25 column with Nightrose. And you can just call back your unit and then tap it with Navigator. But that being said, I do like how Nightmist is able to basically act as your extra copies of Columbard, because there will be those times where you have to call Columbard in main phase to get something in the drop zone so you can start doing your stuff. And since you're locked into a hard once per turn with him, you're going to have to do something else in the form of Nightmist, who you can call in battle phase with Nightrose and get another call, such as a Skull Dragon. Then 4 copies of Greed Shade. This particular version of the deck actually is pretty mill heavy, so you get more value off of Greed Shade in your early game. He is able to get you back your grade 3 so you don't misride. You can get back your Sentinels. Greed Shade's good, and he's a 19 under Nightrose, which is pretty cool. Then for the remaining 2s, I'm just playing 2 copies of Stormride Ghost Ship. Since you're able to just send it off with Columbard, you don't have to max out on him, which is great. Reduces the chances of you having to sit with him as a brick in your hand. And yeah, like, for all intents and purposes, this is just a better version of the new card, Thin Miss Banshee, as he swings for no more. He'll be 29 under Nightrose, she's 24, and the draw effect is not a hard once per turn, which is really, really cool. So yeah, you just swing, die, draw, and it's quite possible to get 4 of these off in a turn too. You can just basically do the same combo that you would in order to get the 4 Skull Dragons. And moving on to the grade 1s, let's just start with the more controversial one, I guess, which is Sea Skeleton Navigator. So I'm playing this guy over Tommy the Ghosty Brothers, as I feel like this guy and Tommy conflict in the deck. You don't really want to be devoting space for both of them, as you'd have to cut into your Banshees, your Cutlasses, and your Negro Bones, and you don't want to do that. So what is this guy do? His effect is, on Rearguard, you rest him and another unit in order to send the top 5 cards of your deck to the drop zone. So, for all intents and purposes, it is a Curry Bandit that doesn't tribute itself. And the reason why I'm playing this over Tommy is that, much like Tommy, you get to see the top 5 cards of your deck. However, instead of just adding one and putting it to your hand, you just send them all off instead. And since you're already playing Greed Shade and Columbard, you can just get back the Nightrose that you would have milled off of this guy anyway, while also setting your drop zone up by 4 more cards. and that's going turn 1 and turn 2. Like if you open this guy and you resolve him, and then on your turn 2 you ride, you resolve this guy again, you're now 10 cards into your drop. Your Greed Shade has much more value for targets you can use, and then on the turn 3 when you ride Nightrose, you use them again, and now you're 15 in drop. You've likely hit Negro Bones, you've probably got Cutlasses, Skull Dragons and whatnot. Like unless you're really unlucky and you hit triggers on all 3 of your uses of this, I don't know what to say. Like if you were that unlucky to begin with, that means your Tommy wasn't going to hit anything, and your Greed Shades also would have been pretty iffy. But admittedly, there is like the small downside that because you're committing a card from your hand and another card from hand to use this guy as soon as possible, you're a bit more open to removal, as decks like Kagro, Gear Chronicle, and Link Joker and whatnot can potentially snipe this guy. But I think it's worth the risk, as being able to accelerate your drop zone that much, it can do so much. Like you saw in those games on Cardfight area, just how much I was able to pop off because this guy managed to get me that much deeper to my drop zone. Like for all intents and purposes, he's Rest 2, power up Skull Dragon by 10,000 power, which again, him being your win con's pretty important. But that being said, if you don't want to play this guy, then of course Tommy is what you would play instead. If you already are playing Tommy, I highly suggest giving this guy a shot and see how it goes. On the plus side too, for anyone who's looking to build this deck, Tommy's probably looking to be a $25 to $30 card because it's a grade 3 searcher and it'll have good longevity, truth be told. Whereas this guy is just a common, so he'll be much cheaper. So for anyone who's like just looking to play this deck in standard and only standard, then again consider this guy. But if you're looking to play the second premium, then yeah, get Tommy as well. So that's what I gotta say about Sea Skeleton Navigator. I think he is slept upon right now. Like Japan doesn't play him, but that's because they're still in the early testing stages of their Night Roses. I think someone will eventually see this guy and go, oh wow, this is actually really good, and they'll go from there. Then for the grade 1s, 4 copies of Dancing Cutlass, because this deck kind of blasts like you would not believe. You're using 2 per turn once you get to Nightrose and Columbard in circulation, 3 if you have to use the Night Mist. So being able to recharge those kind of blasts, and admittedly potentially get a nice mill off, is pretty good. Then 4 copies of Negro Bone. This is one of your best cards too. Like his ability to discard a card, then you bot deck him to call a grade 1 or less from drop zone is pretty cool. But if you happen to have 10 or more in drop zone, then he calls any grade instead, which is great for getting things like Ship, Skull Dragon, and Banshee out. You can use him late game to set up double Skull Dragons, which allows you to do your 4 attack combo with them. And the fact he bot decks himself too means like you aren't at least as much of a risk of decking out as you would before. And he will be what you dump with Columbard as the game goes on, because you'll be putting 1 to 2 back to your deck every turn. So Columbard puts 1 out into your drop zone. And rounding out the grade 1s, 3 copies of Ripple Banshee. You'll use her a couple times in the early game, but as time goes on, you use her less and less, so I'm just only playing the 4. I want to see these other guys first, so I'm playing 3 of her instead. Then for the triggers, I am playing for 8 vanilla crits, 2 of the Sentinel crits, which are 30,000 shield, and 2 Sentinel draws, as well as 4 heals. So I was initially playing 12 crits because, well, it's Grand Blue, you can get away with that, but I like the option of having both the draw PGs and the 30k shields, as there will be those games where even the 30k shields are just not enough to block the attack and you just have to perfect guard it, like a Valkyrion or something like that. This guy can help you, and you can get away with playing a split like this because Greed Shade can just get them back. Furthermore, you're a Protect clan, and this deck plays Protect 1, so you have more copies of this while also having access to your 30k shields. And that is it for the deck itself. Now, as far as that kill play goes, that one is pretty easy to explain. So you need to be at, obviously, a big drop zone. You need to have 2 Negro Bones in your drop zone. You need a Columbard in your drop zone, and then 2 Skull Dragons. Admittedly, this can also be 2 Ghost Ships if it's early game and you can't push your opponent to dead. But like if your opponent's at 3 or 4 damage, then yeah, this is what you're aiming for. So let's do the thing. So you're obviously going to be on your Nightrose, and let's just stick, oh, I don't know, let's just do that. Okay, so here's your setup. So you use your Negro Bone, number 1, you ditch a card, bot deck him, call your Skull Dragon. use your second Negro Bone, ditch a card, bot deck him, call your second bone, Skull Dragon. So you go swing, die, swing, die. They're likely 50 to 60,000 power at this point, so that's a fair amount of guard required from your opponent, or they're just going to let them hit. The Nightrose attacks, counterblast 1, call something to a column, so your front row is going to be Skull Dragon, and then behind it is going to be Column Bard. Column Bard's effect, counterblast 1, yeet your Negro Bone, and then you just call back your other copy of the Skull Dragon. Nightrose does her 2 checks, and this dies, so these get another 2,000 power. Swing, die, another 2,000 power, swing, die, and that's how your turn plays out. You happen to have a body in the back, so you can just later on promote it up to the front, and you just use it as an attacker and whatnot. And that's how you manage to get 4 attacks off of Skull Dragon in 1 turn, which will require multiple perfect cards, multiple cards out of hand to block, or your opponent just takes them all and you're potentially able to kill them, because again, these are going to be big beefy swings. So short of your opponent hitting multiple damage triggers, this can potentially kill your opponent from 3. And if they're not at 3 and they're at say 1 or 2, instead of doing that, you just use your Negro Bones to call ghost ships out, and you do the same line of play. Swing, die, draw. Swing, die, draw. Nightrose, swing, counterblast 1. Call, counterblast 1. Call. And then you just swing, die, draw, swing, die, draw. You got 429 swings, and you drew 4 cards that turn, so your hand's going to be pretty healthy going into the next turn. And then ideally they're at 3 or 4 damage. Afterwards you just do the Skull Dragon play that I just mentioned. You might have to use Column Bard, or you might have to use Negro Bone to bring back Column Bard to yeet the Skull Dragon. So in that case you'll have to use Nightrose call Night Mist. There we go. And that's all for that. All in all, I'm pretty pleased with how they handled Nightrose. Again, she plays very similarly to a G deck, and like it does a good job of retaining the spirit of G Nightrose. Obviously, it can't do nearly as like the stupid stuff as G Nightrose, but we're also missing things like Go Watch and Negro Lily and Skeleton Cannoneer, who I really was hoping they'd make in this set as a double R or something. Like Skeleton Cannoneer was one of the best cards for original Nightrose, and it's a shame we didn't get him. I'm also surprised we didn't get Negro Rook, truth be told. He would have been a nice beater, but I don't know if I would be playing Rook anyway, because like the grade 2 space is already kind of tight. I could potentially cut a Night Mist for something else. I don't know. But anyway, that's the initial build. Comment down below on what you're doing with your Grand Blue. Have you tried out Navigator? Are you not playing him? And what do you think they're going to do with Grand Blue in Overdress? Because I believe this deck's going to get a new playstyle. And yeah, like I think it's going to get a new playstyle. Obviously, it's still going to call out a drop because that's just what the clan does. But I think they're going to ditch the having 10 cards plus and drop that the standard deck has established, and they might do something instead. And hopefully, the archetype will be decent. Like I'm expecting. Let's see, what can we expect? Like, we've gotten pirates, vampires, zombies, and skeletons, so I don't know what they can really draw upon for the next wave of Grand Blue. Maybe more Cthulhu-looking things, I guess? But that's speculation for far down the road. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time, this is BlueStar9, jacking out.